All right, so it's called the cast off through quarters and recycle, just kind of give it a little square dance twist, because I think we have a lot of overburden that we need to cast off and we need to recycle our programs and face these issues head on. I think everybody pretty much knows the situation, but as an illustration, the situation here in North Austin is back in 2015 to 2019, squaring up 25 to 36 squares a week. Today, we have the Austin Plus Dancers is gone, Buckles and Bows is gone, Hill Country Squares is gone, the Sundancer A2 Tape Club is gone. We are roughly down to one third in just the last 4 years. I don't think anybody can argue that we're not in trouble. So you might be saying, well, that's just Austin. That's not happening here. We've got a good program. I call these pockets of hope. My question to those folks would be, what are you doing? Why haven't you exported it? And the answer is simply they have. They've tried. Color Lab has had a program for years. Success stories. What have you done? How are you doing it? How can we share that with others? Yet here we are. My suggestion is most of them are succeeding on the strength of personality or sometimes good fortune or luck. They either have a very dynamic caller or a dynamic group of people that are very dedicated and working hard. They're not succeeding necessarily because they've created something that is exportable. So you might be saying to yourself, well, if you think there are so many problems, if you don't like what we're doing, why don't you just go away? Well, the answer is, despite our mistakes, at its core, square dancing is a great activity. It's one of the greatest I've ever done. I've done a lot of stuff. If we would just quit doing seemingly everything in our power to kill it, I think it would flourish again. And I think, quite simply put, I love it and it breaks my heart to see what we've done to it. And I want to do what I can to help fix it. Tradition is the number one answer I get when I say we need to fix something. Well, it's tradition. We can't break that. That would be changing square dancing. Well, it's not a good excuse. We need to think through everything we do and how we do it and why we do it and what effect it's having and figure out what's wrong and fix it if we're going to even have an activity to protect our traditions, right? Here's what I won't be doing, okay? I won't be telling you SSD is the be all end all solution. It's a great program. It does a good job of fixing the things that it tried to fix. Unfortunately, people didn't understand it. They think it's just a list. It doesn't really fix the root problems we have. It tried to fix a portion of them while preserving the structure that is actually the problem. I won't be presenting marketing strategies. The number one question everybody wants is, how do we get more people in the door? How do we get more people in the door? Well, until we fix our problem with retention, until we fix the underpinnings, the structure that has decayed our activity for so long, there's no point in looking at the marketing strategies. And I know that we've had some excellent suggestions and programs, and that some people have had some real success, but we got to fix the program. We have to fix our product so that we have something to market that is going to hold up. All right, problems and issues. Well, recruitment certainly a problem. Retention is the bigger problem because anybody we don't retain is going out there and giving us a bad review. They're certainly not giving us a good review. And if we get solid retention, that means people are happy with our product. They'll do our recruiting. We didn't have a whole lot of recruiting in the 70s. We had retention, and that retention generated recruitment. We need to fix what's broken with our retention. And the number one problem with our retention is weak dancers. We have created a situation where square dancing is just getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And I'll go into that in a minute here. The other problem we have is a lack of knowledgeable visionary leadership. No, I'm going to offend some people, but hang in there with me. I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody specifically. We've created this problem and we need to fix it. So who are our participants? Who are the players in square dancing? Well, obviously the dancers, the callers, Color Lab, the club boards, and local and state associations. So the dancers, they've got no part in leadership and vision. They just want to dance, right? But it's the dancers who make up our callers and our club boards and even Color Lab. So if we're not educating them fully and completely, and especially educating them to the fact that they need to keep educating themselves deeper and deeper, they think they think they know what they need to know to guide our activity, right? Callers have a limited amount of, and it varies a lot, of influence depending on the club they're working with. Some clubs treat their callers like their employees. We will tell you what to do. You must do it, period. That's the end. No ifs, no ands, no buts. Caller Lab, it's a great organization. It really is. It does a good job organizing the lists, putting together training materials, certifying caller coaches, events, training, that kind of thing. It does a really good job, but it is extremely ineffective at guiding our activity. And the reason is Caller Lab doesn't have any real power. It can't tell the clubs what to do. It barely tells the callers what to do. It has no disciplinary actions or tools. I'll give two examples real quick here. For at least 30 years, because I found a document 30 years old, Caller Lab has been advising people not to do split programs, not to do mainstream plus alternating tips. 30 years they've been telling people the same thing. And what do? We ignore them. Another piece of advice Caller Lab has given the square dance world for years and years and years is mainstream dancers should dance for 2 years and be exposed to APD, DBD extensively before they move on to plus. We have whole regions of the country that go from 0 to plus. Totally ignore it. So Caller Lab is ineffective at guiding our activity. So who's really guiding the ship? Who's in charge? Who's making sure we have a strategic vision or making the tactical decisions? Who's making the rules? Well, mostly it's those boards. And the boards, unfortunately, they are least informed because we protect our dancers from the sausage making. We don't tell them about the decisions we have to make. We don't tell them what goes into planning a dance. We don't share with them the hard work that goes behind it. We don't give them enough information to make good decisions. And quite frankly, their motivations are not necessarily to even seek out that information because club boards are made of your experienced dancers. Your experienced dancers think they know what square dancing is. They think they know about square dancing. They think they know what the dancers want, and they certainly know what they want. So instead of, and their motivations aren't nefarious, but they are not aligned with a healthy square dance environment. The boards know what they want. They're in power to get what they want. They never ask, what do we need to do to make square dancing strong? What they say is, I want to dance plus. I want to dance rounds. I want to do this. I don't care if there's only two couples on the floor and everybody else is sitting there staring at them and we're killing the dance and hoping the activity or the club doesn't die on their watch. They want to get through 1 year, have some nice dances, and be done with it. They're not thinking about our long-term survival. Boards are most powerful, least knowledgeable, and least motivated to protect or guide square dancing into something more positive. And that's our fault. We haven't educated them to these things. So here's some things that clubs, club boards, and many callers need to understand. Okay? Do we have a plan? Strength of personality is not a strategy. We don't seem to have a plan. Changing nothing is acceptable. Well, we have tradition. We have a great activity. We do have a great activity, but some of our traditions are killing us. That it isn't our fault that society changed. Well, society has changed, but it is our fault. We haven't adapted. We've enshrined our traditions. We've institutionalized our mistakes. We're not willing to look at them. That's our fault. Here's some notions. Plus and SSD are just lists. Plus is not just a list. I've already talked about what Caller Lab recommends, that you have 2 years of dancing. Plus is not just 30 calls. Most of our dancers have been taught that plus is 30 calls. It's a list. That's all it is. It is not. It is 100 calls. It is our mainstream and our plus list. And it is being able to do those mainstream calls at an APD, DVD extended application level. So plus is not just a list. It's a list and concepts. It's a list and a better level of dancing. But we've created a plus that is not that. We've created a plus that is just mainstream dancing with 30 more calls. SSD, same problem is people don't understand that it's not just a list. It's actually a program that uses extended applications in its teaching, has adjustments that allow you to bring in any call you want in SSD as long as you teach it the night you're using it. You can't expect them to know it the next week, which is great for leveling the field and bringing your floor into a teaching mode. Square dancing doesn't need a strong base. Many boards seem to think that we're a plus club. Well, where do you think plus dancers come from? They come from your mainstream base. The dancing level should look like a pyramid. You should have a very strong base, or you don't have a foundation to build on. You're going to disappear. You cannot sustain attrition without something feeding it from the bottom, without something there. The mainstream isn't fun. All right. It isn't fun. I agree. It's absolutely horrible right now. And that's because we've created a very weak base and a very weak mainstream. And I'm going to get into why that is. But mainstream should be fun. It should absolutely be the funnest floor because it should be wind in your face. It should be a full floor. And there's nothing more energetic than a full floor of square dancers. So mainstream isn't fun. I actually agree with this one, but it should be. If you go to nationals, the funnest floor is the mainstream floor because it's got the live band, which draws in the experienced and good dancers. And so it becomes fun again. And it's the funnest floor. Group loyalty is still a strong motivator. It is not. Okay. We look at churches, we look at bowling leagues, we look at service clubs like the Kiwanis, Rotaries, Lions, service clubs, bowling churches. They all peaked basically when square dancing did, the late 70s, early 80s, and they've been going down ever since. People do not need to join groups in the way they used to. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Part of it's the internet, part of it's changing priorities. The point is, we can't base our activity on the social concept of group loyalty anymore. And that has to be re-examined. What you don't know will hurt you. Many people don't know how weak their dancers are. Ask your callers, ask your traveling callers, and let them know it's safe to give you an honest answer because most of them will give you a politically correct or safe answer like, oh, no, you guys are doing fine. Maybe you need to work on a little bit here or there. But if you really ask for their honest opinion, you'll find that most of your floors are pretty dang weak. And not knowing that is a disservice to your dancers and your floor and your callers and your planning. Most people don't know how bad split programs are for you and your floor and how that weakens the dancers. I have a whole section on that, so I'm not going to spend much time on that. Slowing the dance actually makes your floor less successful. Okay, when you walk up to the caller and you say, you need to slow down, people can't keep up, they're breaking down, you actually make the floor less successful because the caller, if he acquiesces to your request to slow it down, they're going to do two things. They're going to slow the tempo down, which is okay. It makes for a less fun, less energetic dance. But the other thing they're going to do is they're going to wait for dancers to catch up. They're going to wait for your weaker dancers to catch up. So what that does is that kills all the flow that they put into their choreography. So if the caller calls boys run wheel around, he's built flow into that. And your floor is more successful because they follow that flow. They count on that flow. But if he's calling stop and go and he calls boys run, wheel around, he's broken that flow. And now not only the people that had trouble with the boys run in the first place are breaking down, but the people who can't remember how to do a wheel around properly and they're fighting with their partner over who should go forward, they're breaking down and struggling, and it just gets worse and worse, and it's a downward spiral. So your floor actually gets less successful when you ask your caller to slow down because you're killing the flow. Strong dancers have more fun. I can't emphasize this enough. A lot of people, when I tell them we need to strengthen the floor, or when I say that strong dancers have more fun, they're like, "Oh, you're just a dance elitist. You want to drag everybody up." And it's like, yes, I do want to drag everybody up, but it's because strong dancers have more fun. They literally do. They're more relaxed. They can hear better. Literally, you can hear better because everybody's had this experience. When you're nervous, when you're struggling, when you're lost, the first thing that goes is your hearing. You can't hear the caller telling you to form lines. You can't hear the other dancers telling you what to do. Your hearing is the first thing that goes. Strong dancers are more relaxed. they feel like they have more time to do things to get to where they're going. They see the formation before they ever get there, so they don't have to wait till they're there to know that they're going to end up in a wave. And so the swing through doesn't throw them when they're not quite there yet. There's a lot of reasons that stronger dancers have more fun. A strong floor is 3/4 strong dancers. A super frustrating floor is 3/4 weak dancers. And what that means is if I have three strong couples in a square, I can bring a couple in and practically get through a normal tip. The converse is also true, which is a super frustrating floor is where you have three of the couples as weak dancers. What that does is that strong couple in that square, there's nothing they can do to wrangle, six other dancers, and that square just doesn't stand a chance. And they break down and they break down and they break down. It's very frustrating. It's tiring. And those strong dancers will keep trying for a while because they want the other dancers to get better. They want to succeed. They don't want to give up. But eventually, they'll quit going to a weak dance. The evils of a split program. Mainstream plus alternating tips. Color Lab has recommended against it for at least 30 years. We're still doing it. And I think the big reason is we don't understand just how damaging it is. And when I say evils, I really mean evils. It is probably the number one thing killing us. First of all, it kills the dance. The caller, when they're programming a dance, they program an energy roller coaster, what I call an energy roller coaster. They start at a certain level, they go up a little, they bring it down for the middle of the dance, they bring it back up because a flat dance doesn't give you that emotional lows and highs that a roller coaster gives you, whereas a well-programmed dance does. Well, first thing you do when you split the program is you kill that flow because your mainstream dancers are on one flow, your plus dancers are on another flow. The mainstream dancers are setting out while the plus dancers are dancing so that energy doesn't carry over through that next tip. It just kills the dance in terms of an energy level and entertainment value. You also create a weaker pool, plus pool, and I'm going to combine these two here. It creates a much weaker entry level pool. And I watched this very specifically one night. I had hurt my ankle, so I was watching the whole dance instead of dancing. Very first tip, mainstream tip. Everybody's on the floor, 7 or 8 squares, if I remember right. So this was back in 2018 or 19. Everybody's having a great time. First tip's over. Second tip is plus. Plus dancers get up. They have a good time. The mainstream dancers are watching them. Third tip, the plus dancers decide they'd rather visit with their friends, save their energy for the next plus tip, and most of them don't get up, and it's a mainstream tip without the plus dancers. And all of a sudden, nobody could do anything right. Everybody's breaking down left and right. The caller hasn't adjusted for the new pool of people. He still thinks it's that pool of people that was in the first tip, and he's created sequences expecting that. Eventually he adjusted, but they come off that floor thinking, we suck, this is horrible, terrible, we don't know what we're doing, what's going on. And the next tip is the plus tip. They're sitting out and they look at the plus dancers out there. They're not breaking down. They're getting through it mostly. And the caller has lowered the level because he's not quite figured out what's going on yet. So they're sailing through it. And those mainstream dancers are sitting there thinking, that's where the good dancers are. That's where I need to be if I'm not going to be in these squares that are embarrassing. And so very next plus lessons, what do? The ones that are capable, the top 25%, 50%, whatever it is, they go to the very next available plus lessons, even though they're not very good dancers. They haven't been dancing 2 years. They can't do DBD. They can barely dance, but they are the best of the worst. And so they migrate out. So the very next time after those lessons are over, it actually gets worse because the mainstream has self-filtered the worst dancers into those mainstream tips. Split programming, alternating tips, mainstream plus or SSD plus is the worst thing we do to our activity. It really is. We've created such weak, terrible entry-level program that people don't want to dance. I don't want to dance at mainstream programs anymore because they're just not fun. It goes back to that one strong couple cannot pull three weaker couples through. It's also inherently unfair. Mainstream dancers paid for a whole dance, and yet they're getting every other tip. And they know that, and they recognize that, and it's just one more frustration for them. It creates its elitist and second class citizen environment. You know, your mainstream dancers are watching these other dancers and they're feeling less than, and they shouldn't be. Bait and switch. We promise lessons, but we give them pseudo dances. People understand that lessons aren't the same as an activity, that learning the skills aren't, and yet we take our fun night and we extend it into these pseudo dances and we waste people's time. Not only do we waste people's time, we're doing it by killing some of the fun from the dance. The funnest activity that people come out of fun night with is when they finally get to do right and left grand and they're going around that circle and they're finding their partner and they're promenading home. Well, by the end of lessons, nobody wants to right and left grand or promenade ever again. The fun, the excitement has been knocked out of them because they've done 1,001, and I'm exaggerating here, right and left grands and promenades and weave the rings because we want to pretend that it's a dance, not a skill building lesson. Bait and switch. We tell them we're going to give them a mainstream or an SSD class, and then we force them into either from SSD to taking more classes for mainstream or from mainstream to plus in some regions where we do the 0 to plus. We do our classes without tests, and then we add tests to our dances. And what I mean by that is, as far as bait and switch goes, is when we get to our dances in many places, not everywhere, but in many places, we test our dancers' patriotism with the Pledge of Allegiance. We test their Christianity with a prayer. And yet we don't do that in our classes. Why don't we do that? Is it because we know that our students would say, well, this isn't for me? But if we get them through 20 weeks of classes, they'll put up with it when they get to the dances. I think it's that latter. It's not right. I already talked about how it's unfair that they pay for a dance, but they only get half a dance. So that's kind of bait and switch. And that whole thing kills retention. Nothing makes somebody madder than when you promise them one thing and knowingly don't deliver that and ask for more. We sponsored a couple into SSD lessons. They timed their vacation around the end of those lessons. They went on vacation for a few weeks. When they came back, the club said, oh no, we've moved on to our mainstream workshops. You can't dance with us because you haven't been taking them. They're not dancing today, and they were great dancers. Continuing education. Square dancing is a skill that must be constantly honed. We need to remember that it's a skill, and we need to understand what a skill is. A skill is not the same thing, and it's not taught the same way as other activities. When we don't speed up what they're doing so that it drives it into their muscle memory, we're doing them a disservice, and we're doing our floor a disservice. DVD and APD are not out of scope. This kind of goes to the next one, which is graduation sends the wrong message. When we graduate our people, we're sending all kinds of messages. One, we're saying you're done learning, you're ready to go dance. Well, that does a number of things. For some people, that literally shuts them down, and they're like, if I didn't learn it during that class, the caller shouldn't be calling it. And therefore, anything that wasn't covered in class, or in some cases, anything I don't remember being covered in class, is DVD and it's evil, and we don't have to do that. The other message that graduation sends is that when we get to graduation and we tell people you've graduated and they don't feel ready, they don't even bother coming to the dance and they're like, well, I must not be cut out for it. When we get to the end and we tell them, you know what, come back an angel, you can take the lessons for free. What are we telling them? Well, you graduated, but you're not ready. It just sends all kinds of really bad messages. I don't like that we do graduations. I think we should leave it to the students to decide when they're ready and offer them continuing education. Allow them to take lessons and offer lessons often enough that they can do that until they're ready to dance on their own. Angeling should not be remedial training. That's part of that graduation message. You graduated, but come back. Your angels should be trained. They should know how to best help students. They should know lessons are not a dance. It's not important to get home. It's important to learn the call. And the best way to do that most often is to wait for the student to decide what they need to do, not to drag them through something, and especially not to drag them through something wrong. I had a board member that wanted to angel. He kept forcing the student to do a wheel around when I'd call partner trade. Finally, I told him, you're not an angel. You need to take the class and you need to start paying for the class because you're not qualified to be an angel. He didn't like it at all. So I probably could have put that a little smoother and not got him so mad, but it was frustrating to have him dragging the students. And it wasn't just that call, it was a number of calls that he was dragging them through just plain wrong. He shouldn't be dragging anybody through. So we need to rethink our use of angels. Traditional lessons aren't the only option. We need to look at different ways of delivering our material. And I have one here called the austinmethod.com. I happen to have created it. I like it a lot. I used it on 2 sets of lessons I did for a club here. Produced the best students we've seen in a long time, the best new dancers we've seen in a long time. It works. I need some to hone out some things to encapsulate it in some different types of delivery, but it's great stuff. The story of legs. So in the 70s, a man invented a better way to man and cheaper, better pantyhose that were actually cheaper. And he went to the companies and he said, look, I can make these faster, cheaper, and better. They won't run, they last longer. Because we can make them cheaper, we can sell them for 50 cents a pair. And the company said, no, we cannot sell them for 50 cents a pair. People won't believe they're better. You will devalue your product by selling them cheaper. And so they put them in those eggs and they sold them for a premium. And people then understood that they were a better product. Why do I tell that story? Because dances don't need to be cheap. When we make our dances cheap, that's our board saying, we'd rather not pay any more than we have to for these dances. And it sends a message to the public that we don't even value our hour and a half, 2 hours of live entertainment as much as we value going to a movie, pre-recorded movie for $8, $9. It's ridiculous, sends the wrong message. Same thing. Why don't we have Friday, Saturday dances? Because our boards are made of experienced dancers who want to go to events and conventions and things on the weekends. So we don't have Friday, at least here. I know some places do, but here we don't have Friday, Saturday dancers because our board members have decided that they want their Friday, Saturdays free. But what message does that send to the public about our product? It says, well, this is a school night activity. It's a hobby. You can come do it if you want. It's not a great thing for date night, or we don't want to go out with each other afterwards. Back in the 70s, we went out for pizza and the adults, of course, for drinking after every dance on a Friday, Saturday night. We don't have those anymore. We're not doing that. That sends the message that this isn't even worth a date night. And what message does it send to the kids? Well, we're going to hold this on a school night. We really don't care about whether you dance or not, or whether you have school the next day. So we got to think about our messaging. Tip your waiter, pay your caller. Don't be cheap to your caller. Your caller works hard. They work extremely hard. They have a lot of hats to wear. This isn't easy. It isn't easy to get up there and call. We need to encourage people to become callers. In the 70s, we had people quit their jobs. Tony tells a great story about how he became a caller. He looked around and these callers were driving Cadillacs and fancy cars and these traveling callers. And he's like, I don't want to work. I want to be a caller. And that's what he did. So we have Tony Oxendine today, but who are we going to have in 30 years from now that we can look at like we look at Tony and Jerry and Frank Lane and all the other people? Because we don't offer a career path because we're too dang cheap and we don't have the numbers. We don't have the numbers because of the things we're covering here. Moving on. Understanding the caller. All right. First and foremost, people need to understand callers are not your employees to be bossed because you don't have the information, you don't have the knowledge, you don't know what they're doing to be bossing them. But they're a treasured resource that should be consulted and encouraged, but not throttled. I went to a board meeting here at a club and I asked the entire board, I said, do you know what a caller means when he says he's planning a dance? And they didn't. And I said, do you know what he means when he's talking about the energy level of a dance? And they didn't. I said, and this is why you don't understand what you're doing to the caller when you make him change his program. The entertainment he wants to plan or she wants to plan, they can't plan the entertainment that they could if you weren't putting these restrictions on them. So when you don't understand how they program the energy roller coaster of a dance, you don't know what you're doing to it when you insist on alternating A-tips, when you insist on dancing, round dancing, even though there's only two or three couples getting up, you're killing the energy of their entertainment and you don't even know it because you don't have the information. So you really need to, if you're a board member, you need to get your caller involved in your decisions. You need to ask them why they prefer you not to do this, that, or the other thing. Callers need help. So the best thing you can do for your caller, get them a test square if they don't already have one. Get together some dancers and say, we'd like to help you develop your calling. When do you need us? Because right now what our callers are doing is they're using their classes to learn their craft, their live craft. Now they're working behind their computers and their laptops very hard, but when it comes to their live craft, they're using their classes and their lessons. And that's part of what I was talking about earlier, that we're wasting the students' time with these pseudo lessons. Part of that is for the callers to get their training. If you're starting your dances with three or four squares and you're ending with one, that is so disheartening to the caller. And most of that is the board's fault. They're putting in the alternating tips, which is, people are like, oh, I'm not going to wait for a plus tip to do the last main straight tip. I'm going to go now. That's so disheartening for your caller. What can clubs change? Let's get into that. What's good for square dancing and your club isn't necessarily what you want. Ask what your club needs. Ask what square dancing needs. Ask what your caller needs, and you will get most of what you want. But if you try and go straight for what you want, I want plus tips, you're going to kill square dancing. You're going to kill your club. So think more about what you need than what you want, and you'll get what you want. I promise you will. But in the meantime, if you try and just go straight for the goods, you lose. We all lose. Focus on dancing and strengthening the floor. That should be your focus, not anything else, but on what they do need. All right. Encourage learning. When somebody comes up to you and says, he's calling DVD, he's calling APD, we graduated, we don't have to do that. Switch it around on them. Tell them, no, this is what we need. This is what we've asked the caller to do. Don't pass that on to the caller. Get comfortable with the internet and available resources. There's a lot of stuff out there, including theaustinmethod.com. Okay, another plug, shameless plug. Politics, religion, and racism. Somebody online said, don't get into politics. Well, I'm going to. And the reason I have to get into politics is we bring politics into square dancing and it's driving people out the door. That couple that I told you, we bait and switched from SSD to mainstream while they were on vacation. Other deciding factor was the politics, religion, and racism in our activity. It's not much of a secret that square dancing was actually sponsored by Henry Ford as an antidote to the Black and Jewish jazz clubs and dancing. So we started with racism, and we need to do what we can to make sure that's not happening. And sad to say, I haven't danced. No, none of us have danced with a lot of people of color in general. We had one guy at a dance, and somebody came up to him and said, "What are you doing here?" Very clearly, what are you doing here as a person of color? It's not supposed to be part of it, but it is. It really is. When a caller gets up and says, "Lessons are coming up, go out and invite your friends you think will fit in." I didn't understand that for a long time. And then it's like, oh, we want our white Christian, straight, conservative neighbors. We don't want anybody else. So what can we do? Stop forcing people to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm sorry. It's stupid. I pledge allegiance to the flag. How do I know I don't say it because I think it's stupid. Okay. How do I know what the flag wants? How do I know that the flag is satisfied? How do I really give my allegiance to it? And when I joined the Air Force, I swore a much stronger oath to defend the Constitution from, all enemies, foreign and domestic, and if necessary, give my life to do that. So being asked to say the Pledge of Allegiance actually offends me. I know it does other people as well, but more importantly, what is it really for? It's value signaling. It's to say, if you don't like this, maybe you shouldn't be here. Same thing with prayer. What's prayer got to do with square dancing? What are we really doing? We're testing people's fit to what we want for our social gathering. I want to dance. I want to dance with good dancers. I want to dance with people and have fun. So square dancing isn't just for white conservative Christians. When we do that, we are limiting our pool of people horribly. We're cutting out more than half of the population. Why would we want to do that? If we're really wanting to get more people dancing and on the floor and at our conventions and our events, we need to stop. Just stop. Speaking of which, stop splitting your programs, your mainstream plus SSD mainstream, just stop splitting your programs. Stop baiting and switching with SSD or mainstream slash plus. Offer an entry level program and offer entry level dances. If you can't do that and support a plus club, then drop the plus club because you're killing us. Stop guilting your members into coming and dancing. Okay. It'll work for a while, but resentment will build and eventually something will snap and they'll quit coming. Quit asking for loyalty from your members and start offering good entertainment that they want to come to. Stop graduating your classes. I think I've beaten that to death. Stop using the angel concept as remedial training. Stop charging less than the price of a movie for live entertainment. Most of this is just kind of a recap or a checklist of what we've already talked about. Strengthen the floor. Organize workshops, strengthen your dancers, fix their bad habits, teach them concepts, teach them how to do angeling properly, how to wait for the dancers, how not to drag them, how to dance before they become angels, so they're not trying to do a wheel around when you call a partner trade. Free your caller. Don't change their program. I can't tell you how many horror stories I've heard from callers where they show up and they're told that, oh no, we build this. We told you it was mainstream, but we build it as a mainstream plus. Or, oh, by the way, we're doing a theme night. Your caller has prepared and planned an evening, and if you change the program on them, they're not going to give you their best show. Don't do it. Don't ask them to slow down. I already covered that pretty extensively. Don't throw a fit if they workshop. I talked about that a little bit. If somebody comes up and says, they're doing DBD, now I don't want to do DBD. Turn it around on your members. Don't take it to your caller. Don't tell them what music to play. They have prepared music with energy levels that fit a construct and the music that they're comfortable with, music that they've practiced. Don't tell them, you can make requests if you know it's something that they do. And if they do it, they do it. If they don't, they don't. But don't tell them what music to play. Don't break their stride. Don't interject your club meetings, your round dancing with only a couple couples. Now, arrange for the stuff ahead of time. Yeah, if you have a lot of round dancers, fine. But if most of your floor is sitting there watching 2 or 3 couples round dance, you're killing the energy of the room. It doesn't kill the energy of the room near as much if most of the dancers are getting up and round dancing. Sure, that becomes part of the energy. But if most of your dancers are sitting around, then stop. Save your critique. Do not critique the caller during the dance. It takes a lot already for them to get up there behind a mic and sing and talk and call in public, and you get in their head and start critiquing during the dance. It's not kind. And when you do critique afterwards, if you choose to critique at all, be honest but kind. They welcome the feedback, I guarantee it, but they want it to be kind and thoughtful. Keep that in mind. Work with your caller. Organize a test score for your caller to play with. That is the number one thing you can do for your caller. That is the best gift you can give them. Literally. I mean, if you can do that, work out something with your caller to, scheduling obviously, but that's the number one thing that will help them become a better caller, free them from trying to do it during lessons, give them confidence, everything about it. Consult with them before you make any major changes. When you're planning dances or events, make sure that they know everything about it, that it's going to be a themed dance, Work with them, consult with them to develop a training program that really works. Very important. If you can't make the changes we need within the current structure, within the club format that we have, you can't get people to change. And I know this is pie in the sky, but start a couple run club or start a caller run club where the caller's running it, calling the shots, because sometimes democracy doesn't make for the best decision making. A couple run club or a caller run club is more like a monarchy, right? or a dictatorship. And of course, they don't necessarily make the best decisions, but at least they're flexible. They can make changes. They can learn and grow, and they don't have to drag other people through that learning growing process. My wife and I ran a club here called Austin Plus Dancers, which by no coincidence has the initials APD, because we said from the very beginning, we are a workshopping DBD APD plus club. If you're not here to workshop, if you're not here to get better, we are going to be stopping to workshop. We are going to be mixing the squares up. We use computer assigned squares. If that's not what you're looking for, this isn't the club for you. And we were tremendously successful. And it wasn't that hard. It's not as much work as your boards make it sound. It's work for sure, but it shouldn't be something you don't consider. Here's my pie in the sky. I would really like to see us turn square dancing into a business, into a entertainment business that has franchises, people that own square dance halls and that set the rules and say, look, this is what works for our activity. This is what fills the floor. So if you've got a big pool of money and you want to talk to me about starting square dance as a business, I think there's a huge, huge, huge opportunity. If we only got 1 in 1,000 people to dance, we'd have 300,000 people. It's pathetic what we're doing now. And that's actually less than we had back in the 70s and 80s. Moving on. What colors can change? So can you do it again? Lessons are not your time to practice sight calling and resolution. If a student says, can we see that again? You better be able to put them exactly where they were, exactly with the calls leading up to that. Because sometimes the mistake was 4 calls before they even know it. They weren't half sashayed and they were supposed to be, but that was 4 calls before it. So they don't even know. And if you can't reproduce it over and over and over again and get them smooth on a known repetitive review, you're doing a disservice to your students. Okay, it's not your time to practice sight calling and resolution. And along those same lines, lessons aren't impromptu; they must be planned, especially the review sequences. Every word is a lesson. It's not a shortcut of the definition if it doesn't survive either into the next level or extended application. So if it isn't always true, it isn't ever true. Okay. Don't teach them shortcuts that turn a ungendered call into a gendered call. Okay. Don't teach them that wheel around as the girls go forward. Speaking of which, cueing, I'm sorry, should be minimized and done carefully. We have a lot of dancers out there that think wheel around is a gendered call because of all the times they heard wheel around and the girl goes forward. And they heard it over and over and over. So if you combine standard applications, so you never do wheel around as a half sashayed couple or a same-sex couple, it's not surprising that your dancers think that wheel around is a gendered call. And when they're half sashayed, they're going to do a reverse wheel around. Oh, there's always time for the basics. Make sure you cover the basics. It isn't just about learning lists of calls. Teach them the importance of frame and flow. Teach them why we hold hands. Teach them why we do this, why we do that, so that they understand what is behind it, as well as the physical act of getting from one place to another. So teach them concepts. Teach them about formations and what the formations are and the why we do things. Square dancing is a skill, and skills require a skills-based method. If you don't know the difference between skills-based teaching and teaching history or math, then you need to do a little research and understand that. An excellent book called Peak, and it talks about how to practice and how to learn and skills-based training. It's an excellent book. Let them see the sausage making. I can't tell you how many people have told me we don't air our dirty laundry in public when I've tried to bring up issues with square dancing and the way we've made these mistakes. Well, dirty, wet laundry left in the hamper stinks. It stinks real bad. So we got to air our laundry somewhere. And yeah, you don't want to make it negative. You don't want to drive people away with negativity or with our problems. But that doesn't mean that you hide the sausage making from them, the decision making, the reasons we do things from them. Because think of it this way, the dancers you're teaching today are the club boards of tomorrow. And if they don't have the right knowledge, if they don't have the information, if they don't understand how the decisions they're making are affecting our activity, that's your fault, okay? Because you decided you'd shield them from our dirty laundry. All right, don't follow the wrong hero. Okay, we have some excellent callers out there. Jerry, of course, is gone, but he was one of my heroes. Tony Oxendine, Mike Seastrom, just Ken Bauer. It just list goes on and on. Wade Driver. It just goes on and on and on. But you need to know as a caller, we're still into caller information here. You need to know the difference between a traveling caller, a camp caller, and a local caller. If you're trying to be a local caller, don't necessarily emulate a traveling caller. A traveling caller goes home on vacation for, the off season for 3 months and they work on, I don't know how many, five, six routines that they then take on the road. And if you were to follow them from town to town to town, pretty soon you'd actually get bored with dancing to them because you've seen all their material. Their material is memorized, it's carefully crafted, and yeah, they're able to adjust it, and they do some site calling to adjust and to do some teaching and mix it up a little bit or keep it interesting for themselves. But they are not doing what you think they're doing. They are not site calling every night and putting on a different show every night. Camp callers have a whole different, and by camp callers, I mean like resort callers. They have a whole different thing that they have to do, which is they have to satisfy the same group of people for an entire week. So they have a different set of criteria they need to meet. As a local caller, you have the same people that you have to entertain week after week. You can't do it the same way a traveling caller does. You can't memorize and learn and practice and perfect a routine every week. It can't be done. And for that reason, I've chosen, and you can take it for what it's worth, that site calling, while it's an important skill, if you break out of whatever it is you're trying to do, whatever method you're trying to do, you need that site calling to keep them moving, keep them going, and then resolution to get them home. But I maintain it is not the best choice for local callers. I have chosen, and I would advocate for anybody starting out calling, go with cued calling. Use cue sheets. Learn how to use them right. Don't abandon your audience or your dancers. You have to be able to watch your cues and you have to practice them beforehand and almost have them memorized. But you use them to keep you on track and to, more importantly, work out your choreography and your routine and keep it interesting. Because, and I'll tell you, I've danced to a lot of local callers that think their site calling has variety. And it doesn't take long till you've gone through all the stuff they're comfortable with site calling, and it gets pretty repetitive. The only way you can keep that variety for your local club is to keep a record of what you've done and do something different, because you might think you're doing variety, you're probably not. Plan your lessons with written plan sequences. I pretty much already covered that you have to have repeatable stuff. Student says, can you show me that again? You got to get them back there and you got to get them back there the same way. You have to be able to get them through a routine until it's smooth. Don't just teach them till it looks like, they kind of have the calls. Get them through stuff smoothly so that they know what flow feels like, so they know how to communicate, so that it does feel like dancing, even though you're teaching them skills. Focus on the skills. Lessons are lessons, not dances. The students do understand and expect this. I just taught 2 classes of lessons this spring and summer, 12 weeks each. And the very first night I told them, we are not square dancing here. We are learning the skills of square dancing. And at first they were a little confused because, people that invited them in told them they were going to be dancing. And once I explained it to them that square dancing is a skills based, and I'm not going to waste your time pretending that we're dancing. We're going to learn the skills and we're going to learn them really, really well so that when you do dance, you're going to be comfortable, and because better dancers have more fun. Pretending lessons or dances waste everybody's time and drives the fun out of our Sicilian circle stuff. We've already covered that. Practice your calling skills with a test square, not your students. In other words, don't practice your site calling and your resolution on your students. I truly believe that if we go back and re-examine the things we think are set in stone. If we look at the cause and effect of what we do, if we look at how we built into our structure, specifically the club board structure and the education of the people that are in those, if we go back and we look at these things and we examine them and we make some changes, most of these changes you may have noticed were just stop doing the wrong things, not even asking people to do complicated or expensive things. Just stop doing the things that are bad for us. Our activity will flourish, we'll grow again, and we'll be back to where we were if we stop shooting ourselves in the foot, unload the gun. And that, my friends, is about all I have to say.